You're already 37 and still single? Must be tough spending New Year's alone, my sister sneered loud enough for everyone to hear. I set my glass down and said calmly, don't worry about me. I've been married for a long time. My mom froze mid-toast. You're already 37 and still single. Must be tough spending New Year's alone. My sister Vanessa said it loud enough for the whole table to hear. Then she leaned into her husband Trevor's shoulder and smiled the way people smile when they've just made a point they're proud of. I set my glass down slowly, looked straight at her. Don't worry about me, I said. I've been married for a long time. My mother froze mid-toast. The champagne in her glass went absolutely still, like even the bubbles had stopped to listen. Vanessa laughed, the reflexive laugh of someone who hasn't yet understood that the ground has changed. That's not funny, Daniel. It wasn't a joke. The table went quiet in the specific way that tables only go quiet when something irreversible has just been said. My father set down his fork. Trevor looked at Vanessa. Vanessa looked at me, and I looked back at her with 8 years of patience cashed in all at once and thought, there it is, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you what kind of family I come from. My parents are good people who built a very small world and furnished it very carefully. My father, Robert Cahill, spent 31 years as a high school history teacher in Naperville, Illinois. My mother, June, taught piano out of the front room of the house I grew up in until her arthritis made it impossible. They are not cruel people. They are not malicious people. They are, however, people who learned to measure the world by the yardstick that was immediately in front of them, which meant that when their daughter Vanessa married Trevor at 24 and produced 2 photogenic children by 30 and purchased a 4-bedroom colonial in Downers Grove, that became the ruler by which everything else in the family was sized. Vanessa is 3 years older than me. She and I have never been close in the way some siblings are close. That easy, texting each other memes closeness that looks effortless from the outside. We were civil. We were functional. At family dinners, we passed the bread and asked about each other's lives in ways that were technically questions, but were really just verbal placeholders while waiting for the conversation to return to her. I didn't resent her for a long time. I want to be honest about that. I understood on some level that she wasn't doing it on purpose. She had built a life that was visible, measurable, photographable, and the people around her had rewarded her for it so consistently that she had simply stopped being able to see anything that didn't fit that frame. My life did not fit that frame. I am a physician and researcher. I specialize in traumatic brain injury. Specifically, I develop and evaluate treatment protocols for patients in the acute phase following severe TBI. The work is not glamorous in a way that translates well to family dinner conversation. There is no before and after. There is no moment where the patient stands up and thanks me on television. There are treatment outcomes and data sets and protocols that get adopted by trauma centers across the country, and occasionally a family that tracks me down 6 months after their son's accident to say he is walking again. That's the work. I love it. I have loved it since my 2nd year of medical school, and I have never once in 15 years considered doing anything else. My family's relationship with this career has been, at best, arm's length admiration, and at worst, a kind of benign incomprehension that eventually hardened into something more pointed. When are you going to live a real life? My father would ask. Meaning, when are you going to get married, buy a house in a suburb I can visit, produce grandchildren I can hold? He's married to his career, Vanessa would say, with that practiced sympathy she'd developed that was really just contempt, dressed in something more socially acceptable. I stopped correcting them years ago. It was easier, I had decided, to be the cautionary tale, the bachelor brother, the 40-year-old warning label. Let them have the story they needed. I had a life they knew nothing about, and I had chosen that. I had chosen it deliberately, and I had protected it for 8 years, and most of the time it was enough. Most of the time. I met Claire at a surgical robotics conference in London in the autumn, 8.5 years ago. She was presenting research on haptic feedback systems for robotic-assisted microsurgery. I was there representing my hospital's imaging technology evaluation committee, a committee I had been asked to join mostly because I was the only person on my floor who had actually read the relevant literature. Claire's research challenged one of the foundational assumptions in our evaluation framework, and I said so during the Q&A in front of approximately 200 people with what I thought was careful precision. She dismantled my argument in 4 sentences. She was not unkind about it. She was just correct and thorough. And when the session ended, she found me in the hallway and offered to buy me coffee to, as she put it, soften the professional blow. She had dark eyes and an Edinburgh accent, and she laughed at her own jokes half a second before she finished telling them, which I found immediately disarming. We talked for 3 hours in that coffee shop about the research, then about the field, then about medicine in general, then about other things entirely. I missed my dinner that night. She missed a drinks reception she had been obligated to attend. Neither of us mentioned this until much later. 7 months after London, on a rainy Saturday in the Scottish Highlands, in a ceremony attended by 11 people, her parents, her 2 closest friends from university, my colleague and closest friend Dr. Marcus Webb and his wife, and a registrar named Donald who told us halfway through that he'd been marrying couples at that location for 22 years and had never once seen it not rain. Claire and I got married. No family family invitation, no announcement, no performance. My family found out exactly when I decided to tell them, which was tonight, at this dinner table, in this kitchen that still had the same wallpaper it had when I was 11, because my sister had made one too many remarks in one too many years, and I had finally run out of the particular patience required to continue not answering. I should explain the years in between, because they matter. Claire runs the European division of a surgical robotics company called Variaxis. She is, by any measure, considerably more accomplished than I am, which she would dispute and I would insist. She has won the Richardson Award for biomedical innovation. She has been published in journals I assigned to my residents as required reading before I knew she existed. She gives keynotes at conferences, and I have sat in the front row at several of them and watched the room lean forward the way rooms do when the person speaking is saying something that actually changes how you think. We have a townhouse in Lincoln Park, Chicago. We have a cottage in northern Michigan that we spend August in whenever our schedules allow, which is less often than either of us would like. We have a life that is full and specific and ours, and it does not require anyone's approval to function, and that is precisely how I designed it, but there were costs to the secrecy. I want to be honest about that too. The costs were small mostly, and I had made peace with them. Claire had met Marcus, and Marcus had met Claire, and the four of us had dinner periodically, and she was embedded in my professional world in ways that felt natural and right. She had never met my parents. She had never met Vanessa. This was, by mutual agreement, fine, or at least fine enough, but there were moments. My father's health scare 2 years ago, when I drove down to Naperville alone and sat in the hospital waiting room alone and could not explain to the nurse who asked why I had come alone. My mother's 65th birthday, a dinner party at the house, where the family photos on the refrigerator were all Vanessa's kids, and I sat across from them for 3 hours feeling like a guest in a story I hadn't been written into, and the phone calls from Vanessa. Can you cover the kids this weekend? You're not doing anything anyway. Trevor's coworker is divorced, 2 kids, but honestly, Daniel, you really can't be too picky at your— Mom said you've been working a lot. Are you doing okay? I just worry about you being alone. I let her believe what she needed to believe. I told myself it wasn't worth the conversation. I told myself I was protecting something. I was. I just didn't account for how long I could sustain it before the weight of the silence became heavier than whatever the revelation would cost. My mother called me personally in December. Your father's been tired, she said. More than usual. Please come for New Year's if you can. Claire was in London. She had a conference. The same city, different decade, same week of presentations and receptions and late-night conversations in coffee shops. I told her about the dinner. She said, go, be with your family. I'll call you at midnight. She said it in the uncomplicated way she says most things, which I have spent 8 years being grateful for. I drove down to Naperville on the 31st. The house looked the same as it always looked, as it had always looked. The same exterior light on the same porch with the same clay pot that had held the same type of mum every October since 1987. I sat in the car for a moment before I went in. I was not expecting the night to go the way it went. I was wrong about that. Vanessa started before the appetizers. She and Trevor had arrived before me, which meant she had already had time to establish the frame of the evening. She was on her second glass of wine. Trevor had the particular look of a man who had learned to stay slightly peripheral at these dinners, and I respected him for it. Must be nice having no one to coordinate with, she said, when I mentioned that the drive had been easy. Just show up whenever. I smiled, said nothing. Trevor knows a guy from his firm you might actually like, she said, while my mother was still passing the bread. 40, recently divorced, very successful. You guys would probably have a lot in common. Trevor looked at the breadbasket. That's kind of you, I said. I just think at a certain point, Daniel, you have to be realistic about you're already 37 and still single. Must be tough spending New Year's alone. That was the one. I have thought since then about why that particular line was the one that did it. I've gone over the calculus of it, the way you do when you want to understand your own behavior with some precision. It wasn't the content. I'd heard versions of that sentiment for years. It was the performance of it. The way she said it loud enough for the whole table to hear, and then turned to Trevor and smiled, like she had just delivered something satisfying, like my loneliness, the loneliness she had invented, the loneliness that did not exist, was a point she was scoring. That was the one. I set my glass down on the white tablecloth. I looked at her steadily. Don't worry about me, I said. I've been married for a long time. The silence that followed was extraordinary. Not the polite silence of a conversation that has briefly stalled, or the awkward silence of a bad joke. The absolute cellular silence of a table full of people who have all simultaneously understood that something real has just entered the room. My mother's champagne glass trembled, just slightly. I watched her grip tighten around the stem. What? Vanessa's voice had gone up half an octave. 8 years in March, I said. Her name is Claire. She's from Edinburgh. She runs the European division of a surgical robotics company called Variaxis. We got married in the Scottish Highlands on a Saturday in the rain. I unlocked my phone and slid it across the table. The photos were not staged. That's the thing about 8 years of a real marriage. You don't have to curate anything. There was Claire and me on a cliff above the North Sea, laughing at something off camera, her hair going sideways in the wind. There was the two of us at a charity gala in Manhattan Manhattan last spring. Her in a green dress I had specifically been asked to remember was not teal, Daniel, it's emerald. There was a photo Marcus had taken at the Richardson Award ceremony in Boston, Claire at the podium, me in the front row with my hands folded and my face doing the thing it does when I'm proud of something and trying to look composed about it. Vanessa grabbed the phone. I watched her face move through 5 different configurations. Disbelief, calculation, something that might have been embarrassment, something that was definitely anger, and finally a kind of brittle blankness that was her face's version of buying time. This is fake, she said. You're making this up. Why would I make this up? Because she stopped, started again. Because this doesn't make any sense. For 8 years I've been very happy for 8 years, I said. That part isn't complicated. My mother found her voice. It came out smaller than usual. Why wouldn't you tell us? I looked at her. I had thought about this question, about how I would answer it if it was ever asked, and I had a few different versions of the answer prepared. Some were kinder than others. I chose the honest one. Do you know what I specifically do for work? I asked. Not that I'm a doctor. Specifically, she opened her mouth. Her eyes moved slightly, the way people's eyes move when they are searching for information they are not sure they have. She said, you work with brain injuries? I develop and evaluate treatment protocols for patients in the acute phase following severe traumatic brain injury. Protocols that are now in use at trauma centers in 11 states. I gave a keynote at a neurology conference in Zurich 14 months ago. I won the Hadley Research Fellowship Award. I paused. I put it in the family group chat. I sent a photo of the plaque. I looked at Vanessa. You sent a thumbs up emoji, I said, and then posted 3 paragraphs about the boys' soccer tournament. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. The Zurich conference was the week after your son's birthday, I said. I sent him a card from there. You replied to the family chain. Cute, thanks. I wasn't angry when I said this. I want to be clear about that. My voice was level. I was not performing calm. I was calm, in the way that you are calm when you have made a decision and you are simply delivering it. I stopped sharing things that mattered to me because every time I did, they disappeared. They became footnotes. They became background. And when I found something I actually wanted to protect, a person I loved, a marriage I was proud of, I made a decision. The table was very still. I kept it private for the same reason I stopped explaining my work, or correcting you when you introduced me as your bachelor brother at parties, or defending myself when Dad asked when I was going to have a real life. I picked up my coat from the back of the chair. I stopped needing this room to understand me. It took a while, but I got there. My father spoke for the first time since I'd slid my phone across the table. His voice was low. Daniel, I'm not angry, I said, and I meant it. I want to be clear about that. I'm not leaving angry. I'm leaving because Claire is calling me at midnight and I'd rather not be late. Vanessa's voice cracked slightly at the edges, which was the first unguarded sound I had heard from her in years. You think you're better than us. I looked at her for a long moment. No, I said. I just stopped needing you to tell me I wasn't. I picked up my coat. I walked through the kitchen where my mother had taught piano for 20 years. I walked past the refrigerator covered in photos of Vanessa's kids. I walked out through the side door into the Chicago cold, which hit my face like something clean and honest, and I stood on the back step for one breath before I walked to my car. My phone was already lit up in my hand. How bad was it? I smiled for the first time all night. The kind of smile that comes from somewhere real, the kind you can't manufacture at a table. I typed back, I'll tell you everything. I'm on my way home. There is an aftermath to that night that I will tell you in full, because I think partial versions of these stories are dishonest, and dishonesty is something I have had enough of. My mother called me on January 3rd. I was at the hospital between rounds, and I saw her name on my phone and stepped into the stairwell to take it. She asked if she could meet Claire. She said it the way she says difficult things, quickly, without preamble, like a bandage being removed. She said, I would like to meet her, if she's willing. I told her I would ask. Claire's answer when I asked was characteristically direct. Of course, she said, though I want it noted that I've been very patient. She had been. That's the truth of it. 8 years of photographs at family events attended without her, 8 years of holidays explained with they're a complicated situation, 8 years of choosing not to push for a change that wasn't hers to push for. She had opinions about it. We had talked about it many times over the years, but she had understood, in the way she understands most things, that this was my wound to carry until I was ready to set it down. My parents flew to Chicago in March, on the occasion of our 8th anniversary. My mother brought flowers, which she must have agonized over, because she is someone who agonizes over that kind of thing. My father shook Claire's hand and then, after about 30 seconds, asked her a question about her research that proved he had Googled her, which I found so unexpectedly touching that I had to go to the kitchen for a moment under the pretense of getting more wine. Dinner went well. It went better than well. Went my father, who has spent 31 years making history accessible to teenagers, and Claire, who can talk to anyone about anything as long as they're curious about it. Discovered a mutual interest in the geopolitics of Cold War medical research that lasted approximately 90 minutes and required a second bottle. My mother pulled me aside after dinner in the kitchen, while Claire and my father were still going in the dining room. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "She's extraordinary." "I know," I said. "Why didn't you tell us?" I thought about the longer version of the answer. I thought about the Zurich keynote and the thumbs up emoji and the 37 years of being the family footnote. I thought about the care with which I had constructed a version of myself for them that was manageable and two-dimensional and required no maintenance. I didn't want her to become something you talked over, I said. I wasn't willing to let that happen to her. My mother didn't say anything for a long moment. "I understand that," she finally said. And then, "I'm sorry we made that necessary. That was the most I needed from her." I told her so. Vanessa and I have spoken twice since New Year's. The first conversation was short and difficult, and ended with her saying she felt ambushed, and me saying she hadn't been. The second was longer. She called in February on a Sunday morning, and she was quieter than I expected her to be, and she said something I have not been able to fully put down since. She said, "I didn't know I was doing it." I believed her. That was the hard part. Believing her, and also holding simultaneously that it had still happened, that not knowing hadn't made it smaller. "I know you didn't know," I said. "That probably makes it worse." "A little," I said. "Yeah." She asked about Claire, genuinely, with questions that required real answers. What her research was, what her work looked like day to day, whether I was happy. I answered all of it. For the first time in I can't remember how long, I talked to my sister about my life, and she listened. It wasn't fixed. I don't want to pretend it was fixed. These things don't snap back into place. They rebuild slowly, imperfectly, with a lot of quiet checking to make sure the foundation is holding. But it was a start. The night of New Year's, I drove home through an empty Chicago, the streets pale and cold and lit orange from the street lamps, the city in the suspended quiet of a year ending. I parked in front of the townhouse and sat in the car for a few minutes, not thinking anything in particular, just sitting with the strange, specific relief of something long held finally released. My phone said 11:52. I went inside. At 11:59, I was sitting on the couch with my laptop open, and Claire's face appeared on screen from her hotel room in London. She was already in the new year by 7 hours, but she was still awake, because this is who she is. She had a glass of wine in her hand, and her hair was down, and she looked like the first thing I wanted to see in every year for the rest of my life. "Well," she said, "tell me everything." So I did. I told her about the table and the champagne glass and Vanessa's face moving through all 5 colors. I told her about the thumbs up emoji and the Zurich conference, and my father going quiet and my mother's hand trembling on the stem of her glass. I told her about walking out into the cold and the first honest breath of air, and the way the drive home had felt like setting something down that I had been carrying for longer than I realized. She listened the way she always listens, which is completely. No interruptions, no performance, just that particular quality of attention she gives to things that matter to her. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "How do you feel?" she asked. I thought about it. "I feel like I've been in a room with bad acoustics my whole life," I said, and someone finally opened a window. She smiled, that specific smile, half a second before the laugh that followed it. "That is the most medical metaphor you have ever used for an emotional experience," she said. "I've been practicing." The clock tipped to midnight. In London, someone outside her hotel window set off a firework. The sound came through the laptop small and far away, and she looked up briefly at the window and then back at me. "Happy New Year, Daniel." "Happy New Year," I said. Outside the townhouse, Chicago was beginning its own noise. Distant horns, a shout from somewhere down the block, the low percussion of a city remembering it's alive. I sat with it for a moment, let it in. I had spent 8 years building a life too good to explain to people who weren't paying attention. I had stopped needing them to understand it a long time ago. I just hadn't known, until that night, how much lighter I would feel once I stopped pretending I hadn't.